While we're on the topic of converting, I'd like to show you probably one of the most versatile rigs there is when it comes to compositing. You'll be able to use this rig to bend and stretch your images. You'll be able to match your camera moves to compensate for any bumps or jitters in the camera. You'll be able to zoom and scale in on an image as you want. You'll also be able to add additional lighting that will brighten up the scene and add additional lights, compensate for either overexposure or underexposure. There was also a very neat Jaguar that was made out of light that came running down a highway, and he used a picture that he took at night and then he added light to it, and I'll be going over how to do that as well. So you can get some very neat special effects as well as just standard image composition techniques. So to begin with, we'll fire up Blender, and let's go ahead and create a new scene. So we come up here and click and add new, and we can go ahead and add an empty scene. Go ahead and start off with, and let's name this scene Flying Camera. FlyCamera. And press enter, and then I have my OSD hotkey up here showing you what I'm typing. So now we have a new scene, because what I'm going to have you do is start a library here of different things that you can use over and over and over again, so you don't have to waste your time recreating the wheel. And in this empty scene, we only need really two things to start off with. We just need the projection screen and the camera. Later on, we'll be adding additional light. But for right now, let's go ahead and add a plane that will function as our projection screen. So press space, add mesh plane, straight across the top, leave edit mode. Now the projection screen needs to be oriented and sized in the same ratio and same proportion as your picture that you're going to be working on. So if we press N to bring up the transform properties, first of all we want this thing centered. So we're going to shift click into the location X, 0 tab 0 tab 0. We don't want any rotation. And now for this demo, for this video tutorial, I'm going to be using images that are on the same format size or same aspect ratio as this. Actually, we'll be working with a super high def, which is like 2K by 1.5K. And those are all in the 4:3 aspect ratio. When you work with high definition pictures, those are 16:9. So you enter those proportions, you've heard those, 16:9, 4:3. So you enter the 4:3 here in the scale X, tab, 3, tab, and press enter. And now Blender sets the plane to be the same ratios as you've set here. So now we have a 4:3. This is exactly what a television screen proportion would look like. The next thing we need to do is go ahead and add a material for this plane. So if we come down in here into our buttons window, and we click on our materials buttons, and we click on our shading buttons, then we come down and add a new material. And what we want to do here is click on text face, because we're going to be using an image texture from the UV image editor. And we want to go ahead and click it shadeless, because in this when you're first starting out using this technique, go ahead and not add any lights. Let the projection screen itself give you the light. And that's all we need to do there with the projection screen. Now we need to come up and add our camera. Blender has two kinds of cameras. One is an orthogonal camera and the other is a regular camera. So if you come here to add and you scroll down to camera, Blender adds a camera wherever our 3D cursor is. You come to your editing buttons. You'll see here that you have a lens size and an orthographic button. A lens is anything from a 35mm lens to a 120mm lens to a 16mm wide angle lens. And as you use these lenses, though, you start to introduce some distortion into your image based on the curvature of the lens and the visual field that's taken in by that particular lens. And to start off with, we don't want to introduce any additional distortion. We want to control the distortion ourselves. So we're going to start with an orthographic camera. And this orthographic camera needs to take a picture of this projection screen. So it needs to be centered at 0, 0, 0. So we come in here and click in our location X field again, 0, tab 0. Now at a scale of 6, which is the default, when we look through the camera by changing our view to camera, we can see that here's the camera object, here's our passepartout. This is the image that's captured by the camera. This is your viewfinder, if you will. This inner dashed line is the title safe area, which is a kind of a guaranteed to be captured area. And we want to match this line with this outline of our screen so that we're capturing the whole screen and we are not doing any more cropping. So after a lot of trial and error, I have found that a scale of 8 with an orthographic camera covers this whole area. Now an orthographic camera does not, it's almost like the sun lamp in that it takes a picture looking straight down at the plane. It doesn't really matter how far away the camera is from the plane. It takes a picture straight on, perpendicular to the plane, and renders the image. The next thing we need to do now that we have our camera and our projection plane set up, the third thing we need to do is actually put an image onto the projection screen. And the way we're going to do that is through a process called UV mapping. And the UV map acts as a link between the plane and the image. So we're going to borrow a ready-made layout here. We're going to switch to our animation view. Now it's switched over to scene, so we're going to go back to our FlyCamera scene. So we come back to our camera taking a picture of the plane. Let's change this window type. The UV Image Editor window is a general purpose image editing program built into Blender. So if we switch this window type to the UV Image Editor, now we have a special link between these two windows through what's called the UV Face Select mode. So if we select our plane, we can now enter that special UV Face Select mode. And as soon as we enter that mode, we have created a thing called a UV texture. And that texture is shown down here in your editing buttons under here, and it's named UV text. You can have many of these textures, but we're only going to deal with one to start off with. This UV text provides a map between this plane and this image that we want to show. So let's go ahead, and when we do the image open, up comes a list of our most recently used folders with all our textures. And from the CD, go into the texture image directory. Let's pick up that super high def picture of not Antigua, but let's instead use Reby with a fat neck, because we're going to be distorting that in the future lessons. So let's go ahead and get comfortable with using that image. So when we click on the image name, it brings it up into here. We could also just type it in here if we wanted, but I'm lazy, I like to click. And click Open Image. Now the super high def image is a very large image. So if we scroll our mouse wheel down, we can now see the whole image. So now this image is linked to this plane through this UV text mapping. If we leave UV Face Select mode and go back into object mode, we are still in wireframe, so we actually cannot see the image. So if we switch our display mode, I've minimized that menu by clicking that little arrow over there. If we change our viewpoint draw type mode to text